Good day, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the CEO Mastermind AI podcast.
And so, what I want to talk a little bit about is there are many conditions that we've heard of that generally people have been diagnosed with.
Do you want to unleash your body's natural ability to heal?
My top 5 strategies to upgrade your vagus nerve.
A friend and mentor of mine, Dr. Navaz Habib.
Having a diet that's low in inflammatory triggers is of highest importance so that we can maintain the integrity of that space.
Good day, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the CEO Mastermind AI podcast and YouTube series. Well, I got a question for you. Do you want to unleash your body's natural ability to heal? Do you want to take back control of your health? Well, I've got just a man here for you today. It's a friend and mentor of mine, Dr. Navaz Habib. He's an incredible speaker, an incredible human being, father, and business person. I could take up the whole podcast, edifying my dear friend, Dr. Navaz here. But before I hand it on to him, there's two really big things. Right now, he has this book right now, called Activate Your Vagus Nerve. And that's what I was reading the titles about it. He's going to talk today a little bit about the health care and how it relates to business. And really, at the end of the day, none of it matters, honestly, if we don't have our health. We can be our best version of ourselves to our partners, our families, everybody, and show up for our employees. And then Dr. Navaz will give me the link. We'll put it in the show notes, but he's got another book coming out called Upgrade Your Vagus Nerve. And that's happening in the beginning of February, about February 6th. So would love everyone's support behind that. But without further ado, I will pass on the stage to you. And thank you once again to be here. The audience is for an unbelievable treat.
Thank you so much, David. It's awesome to be here and to share the info with you and your audience. So today, I'm just going to share my screen and we can talk a little bit about my top 5 strategies to upgrade your vagus nerve. And that's my book right there, Activate Your Vagus Nerve. It is about 5 years old now, so there's a lot of updates, a lot of new research, a lot of wonderful new data and tools that I talk about in the upcoming book, which will come out in just a few months' time, which is very exciting. So most people don't know what the vagus nerve is and don't really understand the concept behind it. So let me dig into it a little bit for you to explain what the vagus nerve is, its job in the body, and why it's so important in creating optimal health and allowing for your body to actually heal. So some people here may have seen an image like this that talks about how different practitioners, different types of approaches to health actually view our health care. And so what I want to talk a little bit about is there are many conditions that we've heard of that generally people have been diagnosed with. Inflammatory bowel disease, heart disease, fertility challenges, obesity, dementia, diabetes, depression, hormonal conditions, thyroid issues. These are conditions that are generally labels that people have been diagnosed with. There's some sort of challenge that has led to this diagnosis. And I find that this is beneficial in understanding the pattern of what's happening within the body, but it doesn't tell us why something happened. Something has to have occurred. There has to be some underlying cause to these conditions. And this is where we get to look at the root causes behind a lot of these conditions. Chronic stress, poor diet, environmental toxins, lack of sleep, poor relationships, nutrient deficiencies, lack of movement, trauma, microbiome dysbiosis. This is like looking at the depth of biochemistry and understanding that there has to be a root cause behind these conditions. But if you take a look at this picture, you'll notice that we've got the roots at the bottom, we've got the leaves and the branches on the top, but there's a common trunk. There's a common pathway between all of these root causes and all of these diagnoses. And that common pathway that seems to be overlooked, that is often forgotten by a lot of our, unfortunately, within the conventional healthcare system, that common missed piece is uncontrolled inflammation. All of these root causes trigger some form of inflammatory reaction. Our body should be able to control that inflammation. And when we can't control it, we tend to go down this path and eventually lead to one of these disease states on which we can put a label and create a diagnosis and say, this is what's happening. This is the label that we are providing to said person. And it is the job of the vagus nerve to control inflammation. This is the absolute key to what the vagus nerve does within the body. The vagus nerve is our 10th cranial nerve. It is by far the only nerve within the body that has the function that it does. We've got dozens and hundreds of other nerves that go from the spine to the muscles, that go from the brain and the brain stem to every area of our head and our face. But this is the only nerve that goes from the head down to essentially every organ within the body to try to send a signal to particular sets of cells within these organs, which we know as immune system cells. They're called macrophages. And the necessity is to be able to tell those macrophages that we do not need to be in an inflamed state. And we need to set up this control system for inflammation. So the simplest way to think about this is we have an accelerator and we have brakes. The accelerator drives an inflammatory response. It actually drives mobility. It's meant to be a protective mechanism, and that's a good thing. A car is useless without an accelerator, but the car without brakes is a danger. And we need to be able to shift between accelerator and brakes very easily. And it's the job of the vagus nerve to be the brakes, the brake line, the brake pads that slows us down, puts us into a state where healing and recovery can occur, because we can't fill our gas tank while the car is driving. We can't plug in an electric car while it's still moving, right? We can't repair a car when it's moving through the mechanic shop. Like, the car needs to come to a stop in order for healing to occur. And this is the job of the vagus nerve, to bring your body to a slow and a stop to be able to actually increase healing. And that's exactly the job of the vagus nerve, is controlling inflammation. And that is the key to cellular healing and cellular health.
If you can go back, thank you for that. That was an exceptional explanation. And if you're listening to this on podcast, I encourage you that when you have a moment, go down to our YouTube channel or even check out Dr. Navaz online. But I think this is a really powerful chart because it clearly explains the power of the vagus nerve. It really is the highway to health, quite literally. And all the synapses and all the things that you'll talk about. But I think if you look at, for me, this is really encouraging because now more than ever, we have an understanding and a mapping of how could we get healthy? Historically, in particular, Western medicine has been focused on the top half of the tree. The leaves are falling down. Let's figure out what's happening. And what ends up happening, and my hypothesis, the reason why drugs or conventional pharmaceuticals take so long is they really don't take an understanding of what's happening underneath, and they throw a whole bunch of things at the top part of the tree to see, okay, that works. And so the reality is you're just covering the symptom and not understanding the cause. And although there is a time and place for conventional Western pharmaceuticals where the human body and the human brain is an unbelievable I don't know what to say, like a machine, like it's quite literally a miracle. The complexity of the human body, the nervous system, the whole nine yards. And so to that point, what you're getting at, Dr. Navaz, is that everyone is masking it, but not understanding the cause. And the body, even though it is equipped to deal with an incredible amount of stress and all kinds of things that are thrown at us, the last 100 years have been very different. So our bodies are not used to what we're seeing, and we've never had a true understanding. So what I love about this is the ability to focus on really getting to the heart of what causes 90 plus, if not almost 100%, is what you just have on the screen here is inflammation, and then taking control of your own health. And I think, there's a very specific reason where it says take back control of your health in the back of this book, because Dr. Navaz has uncovered the things you can do to get there. So super exciting explanation. This is about taking control. I love this chart because it tells you not really east versus west. I don't really like that kind of mindset because it's useless, quite frankly. There's different modalities for different things. So I think it shouldn't be part of it's not going to be part of the conversation. We align on that, but it's about deep understanding of what you can do. Because if you have any one of those problems, guess what? You can either mitigate it, you can reduce it. There's all sorts of things. So just really want to call attention to this because it is a powerful picture. Thank
I
you.
appreciate that, and it's just great to visualize that there is a common path, and the approach that we need to have is to understand why it happened in the first place and why it's creating the pattern that it is. And that's exactly what I intended to do with a picture like this. And like I kind of mentioned, it's all about learning to control inflammation. We'll often hear, and it's really funny, I just even did a talk this morning, and the practitioner that I was speaking with said that inflammation is a root cause. And I said, it's actually not. It's not the root cause, but it is the common pathway that all of these other root causes and triggers lead to these conditions. And so, why don't we dig a little bit deeper to understand what are those most common but overlooked causes of dysfunction of the vagus nerve, this nerve that sends such important information through the body? What are the overlooked causes to its optimal function? Number one, by far, is improper breathing. So I would highly recommend that we all kind of do this little practice, and we can even do it right in this moment. I like to have everybody kind of just put one hand on their chest, put one hand on their belly, and take a deep breath. And just check in, which hand is moving? Is it the hand that's on your chest that's moving? And are we having kind of an expansive growth of the chest while we're taking a deep breath in, or is it a breath at the belly?
It's at the chest for me.
Chest for you. And I know you were rushing in right now. We were just trying to get into having our call happen at the right time. And you know what? These stressors happen. This is a normal situation in our normal life. And our goal should be, most of the time, to be breathing with our diaphragm and our belly being the driving factor of our breath. But more often than not, we're under stress. We're rushing from one meeting to another, or from one place to another, trying to handle this stressor and pick up our kids and work for at least 7 hours a day, or get up and move. And all of those things are really important. But when we're doing that, we're actually sending a signal to our body that we're in what's called a sympathetic state. Sympathetic meaning the fight or flight state. This is where we feel anxious, we feel driven, we feel there's a lot of positives to this state. It's the accelerator of the car. It's the part that makes us move. It's the part that gets us to where we want to go. But once we get there, we have to be able to slow down. And the key is being able to be resilient between these two. And so in the moment, if you start to notice that you're in a fight or flight state, that you're in a chest breathing state, you're breathing through your mouth, you're breathing with your chest rather than your belly. If you deal with snoring or sleep apnea, something I've personally dealt with, and short, shallow breaths most of the time, we're actually sending a signal to our brain that we are under stress. And when we're under stress, it becomes very difficult to handle or control inflammation. And that signal can't then be sent through the vagus nerve. And what we need to do is take a moment and shift our breath. But we'll get into exactly how to do that in a little bit. So number one of the most overlooked causes of vagus nerve dysfunction by far is improper breathing patterns. No question about it. It's so common and very, very overlooked. Okay. Number two is physical trauma. How many of us have had a car accident, a concussion, or multiple concussions, whiplash injuries, traumatic brain injuries, surgery, military injuries? These are physical challenges that can traumatize and affect an actual shearing or breaking or a damaging effect on not just the brain, but on the areas of the brain that involve the vagus nerve that send that signal out. This physical trauma can really drive certain patterns of breakdown, of dysfunction, and lead to the inability. It's almost like cutting the brake line. We're not able to then send that signal through the vagus nerve to all of those immune system cells that it's time to shut down, or it's time to go into an anti-inflammatory state. And so the inability to control inflammation can come from a physical breakdown in this system. Okay.
Just what I think people might have heard, I know I have, is I love actually I'll never forget it because I always forget it. The sympathetic versus the parasympathetic. So the sympathetic is the accelerator, and sometimes stress is good. Like you need to run from the tiger, you need to work out, build your body, and it builds your strength and resiliency. But I like what you also said around the parasympathetic, which is the slowing and the braking and the recharging. I really like that nuance because I think I've always struggled with which one is which, and I'm not a doctor, so that's why it's like I hear these things. I'm like, oh yeah, one of those what? But I think that one is really great, and I've heard about this for like decades now. So thank you for that. And I think to your point, the importance of the parasympathetic is that was the best analogy I've ever heard as it relates to inflammation. So I think thank you for that. That is a core takeaway from anyone listening or watching this right now, just to focus on that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think we need simple analogies to be able to understand it. So that's one that stuck out in my mind to make it real simple. The next overlooked cause is more of a biochemical cause. And it comes down to dietary choices and the effect that it has then on our gut and the microbiome, which is all of the bacteria, parasites, virus, yeast, and worms that live in our gut. We know that without a doubt that diets that are high in sugar and heavily processed foods, these are ultra processed foods, not obviously like olives being pressed into olive oil is a processed food, but it's still relatively clean. It's still a relative whole food. Ultra processed foods are really the issue here because they're heavily nutrient depleted and higher in calories. So the nutrient density to calorie level is actually very off. And that's what
Basic.
drives a lack of good nutrition. That's what drives inflammatory reactions within our body. Sorry, David, go ahead.
No, I think that's um, yeah, I'm just nodding with you because it's an area that everyone overlooks so much. Like I don't think everyone knows, yeah, I'm not supposed to eat it or whatever, but then they just, like a herd, just keep going straight towards it. I'll just give you a quick anecdote to summary this. I was in a meeting today, the organization that I run, talking with the benefits company and look at the drugs that, because we have a different, many people of various ages, but because we're naturally focused and we're a healthcare company and whatnot, what we see is the drugs that we take are very, very low compared to similar size organization because of the focus on health, the focus on vitamins. And it really should, like, not only it could actually save you money as a business owner, being healthy, not for yourself, but even your team. But I'm just really nodding with this because we can spend probably a whole day diving down in just one of these bullet points. So thank you for the high gloss, but again, I encourage people to dig into this even some more.
Yeah, no question about it. We've all heard about diet. We all kind of understand that there's healthier foods, healthier options, and each of us has subjectively our own kind of best take homes, our best recommendations. And what I'm looking for is a diet that generally isn't low in vitamins, minerals, and good quality macronutrients. I want to make sure that your diet is feeding your good bacteria. And what's often happening is we're breaking down our microbiome into what's called a dysbiotic microbiome. Dysbiosis means imbalance towards optimization, away from optimization, in fact. And what feeds our good bacteria are these good whole foods, high fiber, not heavily processed, good quality proteins, good quality fats. And getting these things in, it doesn't just feed us, it actually feeds our bacteria. Here's a fun stat for you. In our bodies, we have between 40 and 60 trillion human cells. And in just our large intestine alone, we have between 80 and 100 trillion bacteria. It is ultimately
80 to 100.
80 to 100 trillion, basically double the number of bacterial cells in
Yeah.
our intestine versus human cells in our entire body.
It's just my mind is bent. Yeah, my mind is bent.
It's
that is a
something that
mind
we don't
bender.
generally talk about, right? It's something that
Yeah.
we don't think about. But now that we have understood the human genome to be the simple 27,000 gene uh, library, it's so small. We have less genes in our genetic code than rice has in its, right? It's crazy to think that genetically we're so simple, but how do we create such a complex organism that works in such a complex manner? And it comes down to our relationship with our environment. And a big piece of that is how do we get nutrients from the food that we eat and the environment around us. And that comes
Yeah.
down to the optimization of our gut function. Hippocrates said way, way, way back when, and I'm obviously paraphrasing what he said here, but all disease begins in the gut. We know this. All chronic disease, all root causes from a biochemical perspective, no question about it, begins in the gut. And it comes down to gut dysfunction, gut dysbiosis, and your dietary choices that drive these particular challenges.
Can
So,
you, a fact I heard was the gut. So I don't know what podcast I heard or what book I read, but the gut, um, which starts with your nose, your mouth, and your lining. Two facts that stuck out to me. It's responsible for 70% of our immune function, so basically a huge amount. And the size of it is one cell thick,
yeah,
about the size of two tennis courts. So you took the surface area of that. That is what prevents us from getting killed by basically anything in the exterior world. Is that, have you heard that as well? Is that or
yeah.
the moral of the story that corroborated?
Yeah, exactly. 70% of our immune cells by volume are located in the lining of the gut. So our immune system and our gut function and the control of those immune system cells is absolutely at the top of the heap when it comes to importance and our relationship with our environment. When it comes to the thickness of the gut lining, there's a certain area in particular that you're mentioning here, and that's the small intestine that is only a single cell thick. It's thinner than a piece of paper. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
And that's the small intestine. The large intestine is thicker. The stomach has obviously thickness to be able to handle stomach acid. But the where we get the majority of our nutrients, which is the small intestine, that's where the thinnest part of our intestine is, and that's a single cell thick. And so to maintain that barrier, maintain the patency and the ability of that, the integrity of that barrier, the key is that we need to have good cellular function of the immune system. And the immune system is told these signals through the vagus nerve. So, in order to maintain that less than paper thickness integrity in that barrier, that is absolutely, if you were to spread it all out, it would be as large as a tennis court. No question about it. That's where all the nutrients come in. But that's also where the toxins can make their way in because of the lack of thickness there. And so that's where the breakdown can occur. And that's why having a diet that's low in inflammatory triggers is of highest importance so that we can maintain the integrity of that space.
That is, I've always known it, but yet again, you struck out. But in terms of really important point is where you get your nutrients is where the toxins come in, and those toxins are coming through what you ingest. So it's high in sugar and processed food. I won't tell you my employer because I don't want to name them out, but I worked for a large Fortune 500. When I first became a manager in 2004, I was to take the cheese out of this cheese product in a way to make more margin so that the consumer doesn't understand it. So I had to work with food scientists back then, and basically, so that you don't know that a change has happened, but we took out nutrients, which is, if you asked me to do this today for my job, I would say no. I'd be ethically and morally against that. I'm like, I'm not doing it for the sake of margin. But this was, 2000, and it's crazy. And then this is the thinking that's out there, right? And the food engineering to get us to not know that we're taking less nutrients in. So crazy.
What's nuts about that is you hear about it, but we don't generally know these things because people have signed NDAs. They have all these legalities that they're unable to really share this type of information. But when you hear that somebody has experienced this exact thing, that we're actually heavily processing food to be able to just maintain or grow margin, it scares the crap out of me to hear that.
Yeah, and it was a few years later, I was still at this large organization, and we tried to, well, I wasn't on that team, but I was on a different team, but we tried to put back the nutrient and say, hey, as an innovation, let's go back to the formula we had in 1992, like quite literally, when it was a lot more pure. And based on the regulations, again, I won't tell you what country, we couldn't do it. The government said, you can't do it. That falls under a fortified product. People will have too much calcium. And my mind was not blown at the time because I was like, oh, okay. And when I heard about it with the different genes. But if you ask me now, I'd be like, hang on a second, we're actually making the product healthy for you. And our regulatory, and again, that's a whole other diatribe, but the regulatory framework in sort of Western countries sometimes doesn't look at the bigger picture. It's like, trust me, no one's going to overdose because they go from 5% RDI to 10% RDI and calcium. Like they'd have to eat a lot, but then the framework that are around it, then you're fortifying it, that falls under a different set of rules. It's mind bound. This is why this particular topic, I think I know what the other two are, but this really gets at me because this is probably well, so far, 3 for 3, they're easy to control. These are take back control as per your book, but it's just, anyways, I've been in that shoe where both regulatory frameworks prevent you going back to goodness and you got to go these crazy hoops. It costs money. Guess what? Public companies don't go do it. Yeah, mind bending. Absolutely mind bending.
My mind is blown right now. So that's
Yeah,
we
it's
can
20
probably
years
talk
ago,
about
but it's
this
still
for
true.
hours.
But it's still true, right? If you look at,
Yes.
and having worked in the food, I can go on. We won't for this, but like, if I can stress on the audience, like, yeah, the moment it goes from what it was off a tree underground and start changing form, all sorts of things happen to it. Here's another one. When you have natural sparkled water, they say all natural flavors. They're only disclosed to tell you that there's water and carbon dioxide in the water and that they use quote unquote natural flavors, which is true. What they don't tell you is in the processing of that there's oftentimes 50 to 70 different other chemical slippery agents or whatnot to make it go through. What ends up happening is there will be some residue, and those residues, you just talked about it, are called toxins, right? So now you're getting into your body, and some chemical you don't know about now makes it into your body because you think you're eating clean, but you're really not. And then you start having brain fog, or you might have a rash. Why does someone have eczema or like red dots on their skin? And it's because there's some inflammatory response crossing the blood brain barrier, crossing the barriers of your intestine. And this is again, this would be like this is an entire PhD just on this page alone. But anyway, having been in those shoes in that world, no longer in that world for these reasons that I've mentioned, but this is a conversation that needs to be had that the everybody in the world needs to know because we're really designed to live to 120, and all the bad choices are just knocking the years off of it, right?
I completely concur. And it's almost like you knew what my next slide was because the toxins you talk about, these things, these slippery agents that push us into a state where there's extra burden for our body to handle, is what leads to us getting into a state of poor detoxification. Our inability to clear out these toxins or the heavy burden of these biochemical toxins that have entered through the gut, primarily through the gut, but other things can happen. And what this leads to is poor liver function. Our liver is like the garbage man amongst 499 other jobs that it has. Its job is to filter out and clear all of the toxins that come into the body through the bloodstream. And when your liver gets burdened, it's almost like think of the garbage company going on strike, right? The toxins build up, or if they forget to pick up your garbage while they're doing a thing, a collection, and then next week you've got double the amount of garbage sitting in your house. You've got the smell, you've got the potential for vermin and rats to come and grab all this stuff. And what it attracts is a breakdown, or it creates a breakdown. And this is the issue that occurs within the body when we have excess toxin entering, especially when it's toxin that you don't actively know about, which you've now brought to my forefront, which is crazy.
Which is crazy. And I think that's what's important too. The human body can handle these toxins and these in very small amounts. And there's a reason why most chronic diseases show up in their 40s and 50s, because you've been abusing it for decades, 20, 30. So I think for me, as a Caucasian Italian male, mid 40s, I think I've eaten pretty clean, but for sure, I'm drinking these pops and stuff. I used to have a Coke a day, right? I mean, and it's particularly, I used to work in the U.S. Like instead of having a coffee, people would have a Diet Coke to get their caffeine fit. I'm like, oh my God, if I think about that now, how bad that is. Do I have Coke once in a while? I absolutely do. Every once in a while, I got a craving, but it's like literally once in a while because I know my body can handle it. But I think what happens here is our bodies are not designed to handle the toxins that we're throwing at it. It can handle a little bit, but the processed foods, all that sort of stuff, it builds up. And perfect analogy, it gets into a disastrous state, and then you get all these rats and vermin come in, and that's probably another analogy for the diseases, right? Because you get these unwanted things that were the consequence of choices made in your 20s and 30s and even your teens, right?
Absolutely. And this is the key thing here, right? Is what we want is resilience. We want to be able to handle these stressors, but when they are coming at us so fast and furious all the time, and we're not able to shift from being on the accelerator to being on the brakes and slowing everything down, that's where it becomes burdensome, and that's where it becomes really, really challenging. And so the signals that are sent to the liver, to the gut, to the kidneys to be able to handle these stressors become less and less capable of slowing things down. And we tend to
Mm.
sit in this fight or flight state so much more often, which leads to inflammation, which leads to the lack of control of inflammation. And when we go down that chronic inflammatory pathway, that's what leads to these conditions that we talked about earlier,
Right.
the ones that show up at the top of the tree. So, what we need to do is find out all of the root causes, all of the things that cause you to have an inability or decreased ability to push the brakes, to slow down, to get into that controlled state of inflammatory control. Okay. The
Okay.
last of the 5 overlooked areas here is emotional or psychological trauma. This can be either single massive events or slow progressive stressors that happen over a time. So things like traumatic childhood events, victim of a crime, work or financial or parental stress, war or military service. PTSD is a really, really big one. And a lot of people essentially they have this mindset, or they have this emotional stress that drives physiological change, and it
Yeah.
pushes them into a state where they're in that fight or flight state way too much, way too commonly, and the accelerator is just being pushed, but unconsciously. And that's one of the scarier things to hear.
Yeah. Just I've been as I get older, you sort of realize more things, you get aware of more things. But I go back to something that my grandmother said to me when I don't know, I was maybe 10 years old or whatever it was. And here's a little old Italian woman born in 1910. And I'll say it in Italian, then I'll translate it. And it really hits this point home. The expression old Italian lingo from the Amalfi Coast, la penna più pesante della sappa. And what that means is that the pen is heavier than the shovel. That's the literal translation. And the point being is our brains use 30% of our water, 30% of our energy. And what this gets into this trauma, whether it's relationship stuff like event, we harbor it, right? And it's worse on you than shoveling coals on a freight train on your body because it and I don't really understand too much about it, but for whatever reason, without the ability to get into a parasympathetic state, it somehow you hear people taking these meditations, they burst out, crying or they release this trauma. And I've never experienced it, but I know like hundreds of business leaders and people who have done that have had like I've never been a victim of traumatic trauma. I have a stressful life, it's financial stress. I got 2 girls. Parental stress is constant. I mean, whatever, but it's really powerful. The power of the mind, and this is this emotional psychological trauma really brings me back to my grandmother said to me, the pen is heavier than the shovel, and it sticks, right? So like physical, your body stresses, builds, you're stronger for it. But same could be true for a brain, I think. But if you clear it, right? Like to your point, only if you deal with it, and most of us don't know how or where to go to for that, or
Yeah,
how,
you've
like you
got
said.
it. Like that's wisdom at its greatest, being able to say something like that, right? That saying, it's so
Yeah.
simple, but mechanistically, the reason for this is a process called neuroplasticity, because
Ah,
when we
yes.
build a neuroplastic channel, when we build a specific pathway within the brain that almost turns into like this negative emotional loop, and we get into an anxious state and we worry about every negative thing that could happen, we're living through all of these negative emotional life experiences in our head without actually physically having to experience them.
Isn't it called, you're right, the neuroplasticity? Since you said that, there's a thing with the nerve with connect rid I'm gonna say the wrong word, riddle. There's like, and you basically, the more you go over this electrical synapse between the neuron, oh, I remember what presentation I read, but it's, you're basically building a highway, you're making it thicker, and it's almost like a fluid. I don't know what it's, Ritalin, pendulin, what's it called? Do you know?
I'm not sure exactly the point you're getting to, but the concept behind it is neurons that fire together wire together, and you strengthen
Basically,
and build
yeah.
up a very specific pathway. Because if you've experienced something negative once, you're essentially putting it out there as predisposition to it. If you go through something similar like what happened at the beginning of that initial pathway, you're likely to experience that same trauma again. And so you do your best either to avoid that, or you create a negative experience that you live through without actually having lived through it again and again and again.
Yeah, I don't remember what it is, but it's exactly that point. And the more you, if you don't clear it out and all that, the more you go back and forth on that, you make that pathway. And maybe it's an analogy, like you make it thicker, you
Yeah.
just reinforce the behavior, and therefore it becomes part of like how you do things. And then all of a sudden it does become, it's like someone who has mental illness, right? And there's many reasons for it, but then I think part of that could be some of that. You can't just say to someone with diabetes, just snap out of it. Like,
Yeah.
doesn't really work that way, right? Because there's the functional mechanisms happening underneath that you need to understand. It's how do I unlock or peel these back, right? And they start with the first point, like breathing, right?
Yes.
Proper stress control of your inflammation response.
Absolutely. And so what we need to do is understand that there likely are multiple factors that are driving us to be in this sympathetic state often. Some of them are going to be emotional or psychological, some of them are going to be biochemical, some of them we have absolute control over right now, and some will take time and effort to overcome. But there are strategies to be able to do that. So how do we initially determine if our vagus nerve is working well or not? And for me, the best and the most effective ultimate tool is understanding something called heart rate variability, HRV. Okay. We live in a time now where technology is incredibly accessible and relatively inexpensive. And what's really exciting is we can get some amazing data just by wearing a ring or a strap or a watch that gives us a ton of awesome information as to what's going on within our body. And heart rate variability is the marker that tells us about our vagus nerve function and our ability to shift between accelerator and brakes. Okay. This is
Hmm.
really, really exciting. That's what the HRV marker is. And this is, I'm going to quickly, briefly show you how we can do this. So HRV has certain things. So the lower the number, the lower your heart rate variability, the less adaptability you have. You have more difficulty shifting from accelerator to brakes if you have low adaptability or low HRV. So imbalance in heart and mind, low spirit, depression, health issues, easily exhausted, reduced physiological function versus high levels of adaptability, easily able to shift accelerator to brakes, better
Yep.
physical performance, enhanced cognition, relaxation, good sleep, good recovery, low risk of blood pressure issues, improved regulation of the autonomic nervous system. That's what HRV is measuring. It's the autonomic nervous system, and that's the balance between the sympathetics and the parasympathetics. Okay, and
Yep.
how we measure this is HRV, or heart rate variability, is a measure of the average number of milliseconds differentiated between beats of the heart. Okay, it's a very, like, if we dig into the roots of it,
Mm.
get deep into here, it can be very complicated. There's different ways to measure this out. I don't need to get into the specifics here, but what we're looking at is how variable is this? between beats of the heart, number of milliseconds can vary significantly, or they can be very rhythmic. And what's funny is we don't want super rhythmic beats of the heart. We don't want to be like a metronome. We want to have variability. We want to be able to shift accelerator to brakes. Okay. So low
Mm.
variability tells us that we're either pushing the brakes and we're not able to push the accelerator, or we're pushing the accelerator and we're not able to push the brakes. But being able to shift between the two is a sign that we have high variability and we're able to increase this. And so the number of milliseconds between beats of the heart will vary more when we have adaptability. So HRV then is a measure of how adaptable is your body to stress and to be able to recover. The higher the HRV, the better. And it entirely depends on the number of milliseconds between these RR spikes. This is an R spike in your EKG measure. Don't worry about what that goes to for kind of the basic person. What we're looking at is better HRV. Higher HRV is better, period.
And I've been tracking it myself, but it's I have a Series 4, so here we are in the fall of 2023, and the Series 4 is pretty old. It's probably about 4 years old. So to your point, the technology is readable. I can do an ECG. I actually don't think the watch itself does, but I got an app that measures my HRV because I started looking at this about 6 months ago, and I
Yes.
just ordered an Ultra Human ring, which is a competitor to the Order ring, and I have an Aura ring as well too. Yeah, just totally, which I actually got through your link, by the way. So it is kind of cool to kind of see how this all plays out.
Yeah, there's a ton of things out there. There's a ton of competitors and a ton of tools that are really quite amazing. And so pick and choose whatever you feel comfortable using. I've had my Aura ring for nearly 5 years. I have tons of data on it. It's wonderful. And I love that I'm able to wake up and pretty much know where I stand even before I look at the data of it now. But early on, it's great to understand, man, I'm feeling a little run down today. Oh my God, my HRV was incredibly low. I didn't sleep well. I had challenges. I'm going to take it easy today. I'm not going to push myself into a state where I might become depleted later on. So now I know, and I have this feedback mechanism and this awareness that helps me drive my lifestyle in a much more positive direction. Okay, so pick and choose. They're basically all very good, and they'll continue to get better in terms of accuracy and whatnot, which is obviously great to see. So now that we know how to measure it, we know what causes it to break down. What are some of the top strategies that we can utilize to help improve vagus nerve function? We'll go through 5 of my favorites very, very quickly and easily. Number 1, upgrade your breathing. No question about it. We talked about how the breath is a huge issue and that most of us aren't breathing effectively at all. So what we want to do is focus on nasal and belly breathing. So breathing through our nose. Our nose is our breathing tube. Our mouth is our eating tube, but it's a great backup breathing tube when the nose is plugged or when there's issues going on there. But a signal to our body that we're in a good, happy, healthy, calm state is simply breathing through your nose and into your belly, into the diaphragm, using the diaphragm really effectively. A really wonderful tool, because most of us can't consciously control our breath while we're sleeping, is to actually tape your mouth shut at night. Mouth taping is one of the most effective and most wonderful ways to ensure that you're breathing through your nose all night long. Huge fan. You don't need to go for the expensive options. You can get something really cheap, tiny little piece of tape over the center of your mouth, and usually that's more than enough to help people ensure that they're breathing through their nose for the 6, 7, 8, 9 hours that they're sleeping through the night and unconsciously breathing or subconsciously breathing. If you want to dig deeper into this, doing regular breathwork sessions is a great way to do so. Breathwork is one of those tools that has been around for generations and for thousands and thousands of years, and is just now making a resurgence in the awareness so that people can actually utilize this. Breathwork is wonderful. I'm a huge fan. And for the health geeks out there, if you listen to the Huberman Lab podcast and Dr. Andrew Huberman, one of the greatest voices in science today,
Yeah.
one of those awesome tools is something called physiological sighing, which is literally 2 inhales followed by an exhale. So inhale again, and then breathe out. It's a really cool little tool that helps you shift instantaneously from accelerator to brakes, from sympathetic fight or flight to rest, digest, recover. Pretty much instantaneously, we've seen HRV values that are significantly better when you do that. And so catching yourself in a situation where you're stressed, doing that tool, doing a deep breathing exercise, doing a diaphragmatic breath or a physiological sigh helps to shift you into parasympathetic far more quickly and easily. All right.
I would encourage people that did all of this, but I think for the first time did it properly with a focus session last week at an event, at Gio's event. And essentially they did the 2 inhale in out, which I've never really done, but within about literally a minute of doing that with some vigor, it almost felt like I was floating. Like the oxygen rush, the whatever was happening physiologically, endorphins released, the stress. Like I'm like, just so everyone knows, it's not bogus, right? I used to be one of those people, say breathing, like I'm a human, like I'd be dead within like 2 minutes if I didn't breathe. Of course I breathe. But I think the ability to control your breathing and doing it properly based on your physiological, like your tongue at the roof of your mouth, going through your nose. These are all things, Lord knows, I've taken for granted for a long time. And but some of these really can be the unlock for health and dealing with stressful situations, particularly like trauma. Firefighters, police officers, they do the psychological breathing when they see things that were really not designed to be seen. So they're on the front lines, and that's something that's really, I know this fellow by name Brendan Evans really pushing that agenda, right?
I'm friends with Brandon Evans, one of the
Yeah,
best guys I know, and just one of the he's all about breath work, and I understand exactly why. Having been a firefighter in the past himself, and having seen things that are very difficult to unsee, how do you handle those challenges? How do you build the resilience to be able to feel less emotional challenge after experiencing those things? And the answer is breath work, and using these tools to increase your resilience. No question about it. So big fan of this for sure. The next one is extreme temperatures. So this is, think of it this way, very simply. In the same way that when you are doing squats at the gym and you want to build up your capacity, you want to be able to do more, you add more weight onto the bar, or you pick up bigger dumbbells or whatever it is. You're adding extra weight to the exercise. You're doing the same exercise, but you're adding extra weight. That's what extreme temperatures can be for you with your breathing. Okay. So
yeah,
extreme temperatures are a great way to do this. Cold plunges, cold showers. I've been a proponent of this for a very long time. We've all seen how Wim Hof does things in the cold, and how we
yeah.
can use things like hot cold cycling to be really positive, beneficial tools. The key is to bring your awareness to the moment, and nothing does that like getting into a hot sauna or a cold plunge. And when you bring your awareness to the moment and you bring your awareness back to your breath while doing that, it's like adding stress and learning how to breathe effectively, calmly under a stressful circumstance. So it's adding extra weight to the breathing patterns. That's what's really exciting about these extreme temperatures, cold, hot,
Mm.
whatever it is. Okay. And infrared sauna, or even dry saunas and other types of saunas, have other very amazing effects, positive in the detoxification process, in ensuring that we sweat out toxins that are present, in ensuring that we build resilience in our blood vessels so that they can have
That range.
patency and resilience. Exactly. And so there's lots of positives that come from these extreme temperatures. The next one is mindfulness, learning how to catch yourself when you're at your stressful moments and just slow everything down, right? Not eating on the run, not grabbing something in the drive-through and crushing a burger while you're making your way between meetings, or um, rushing around with your kids and then like everybody grabbing a quick bite for dinner, all while everybody's rushing around, being loud and going through chaos. Slowing down, living intentionally, and most importantly, taking time for yourself, right? We've all heard this analogy when you get on the plane: put the mask on yourself before assisting others, right? And
Yeah.
for me, it's weird to say that I should put my mask on before I put on my my 2-year-old's mask, but it's way safer and way more healthy for you to do it first and then to ensure that they are, because you can be in a calm state first, and then you can show up as the best version of yourself when you're then
Yeah.
assisting others. And that's necessary. We need to take time for ourselves first, something that I've had a lot of trouble doing, but I'm learning how, and that's something that a lot of people need to learn. And mindfulness is bringing your awareness, your attention to the moment, to how you feel, and learning how to make positive changes accordingly.
I think a quote that talking to Connor, you know Connor Carrick, the NHL player.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, he said something that really struck with me because I'm like you, guilty of not being mindful as much as I should be, or would serve others before myself, kind of thing. But he said, and I think it's in context of all of this in terms of the mindfulness. He said something along this effect, but you can't outmind bad biology. So you can have the best will, the best mindset, all that, but you can't will yourself out of bad biology. Basically, being that can deal with all the stress in the world. Like you can't ignore physics and functional medicine, like how things work. So I think it's having that mindfulness to say, I can't outrun these problems with my mind, like they are actual real physical things. So what you can do is use your mind to say, hold on a second, my HRV is off, this is off. I love what you said because I've not done it, and I'm going to do it. That you said is using my HRV to say, okay, because I just go hard Monday to Friday, right? Like the only gears I know, but maybe I shouldn't do that, and or maybe shift and take more different practices that you're suggesting in here with that. So I
Yeah.
just thought I'd add to that because I think I used to be ignorant of what mindfulness was. I used to think it was for monks, and really, it's not actually, right? Like our brain and our ability to be mindful is the most powerful. I don't want to say weapon, but it's the most powerful tool that we have that can sort of say, all right, triage, right? It's like air traffic control. Where am I going? Left, right, landing, going up, brake, accelerate. Like you said, I think this is fantastic.
Everything that's ever been built was an idea first.
Yeah,
Everything that's ever existed or could ever exist was first in somebody's mind. It's a
true.
pretty
That's
interesting
powerful.
thought.
Cool. Yeah,
And
yeah.
your mind can only become useful or have these innovative and amazing ideas come to it if it's working effectively. And
Right.
awareness and mindfulness are a huge piece of ensuring that your brain is working as optimally as it can be. So this is what we need to do: is bring our attention to the moment, slow down when it's time for rest, digest, recover, and learn how to hear where our body is off, or when our body's whispering something to us before it starts to scream down the road. Really need to start to become more aware and listen to our own bodies really effectively.
Critical.
The next upgrade that I recommend is vocalization. And one of the really cool reasons behind this one is we have very specific branches of the vagus nerve that go to the muscles around the airways and the vocal cords. These are the pharyngeal and laryngeal branches of the vagus nerve. And what they do is they maintain the patency of the airway at the back of the throat. They ensure that our airway doesn't collapse while we're breathing. And they ensure that we have pitch or tone within our voice. So we're able to go really, really low or really, really high with our voice because of our ability to tension and lengthen the vocal cords using these neuronal pathways of the vagus nerve, specifically the laryngeal branch for that specifically. So what I like to do, this is a great one to do with kids: humming before meals, calming everybody down. We play a game, we buzz like a bee before we eat our food. So we slow everything down. Everybody's laughing. Everybody tends to be quite happy, especially if kids have been running around and doing crazy things. And it's a rush to
Yeah.
get to the dinner table at 5:30 or 6 p.m. And everybody's kind of on their own, and fight or flight is taken over. Learning how to slow everything down right before a meal, especially, is really important, because you can eat all the best foods, but if your body can't absorb it, you're not going to get the nutrients that your body needs. So
Yeah.
shifting our
Spot
state
on.
before a meal is really, really important. I also love adding
That's
gargling before you brush, or when you brush your teeth before or after. Singing in the shower, go for it. Absolutely. Especially like you're in the car, your song comes
Just
on,
sing.
turn it up and go for it, right? Vocalization is a great way to ensure that these things are working. And having difficult or tough conversations with loved ones is actually a great way to get the weight off of you and help to repair or build a relationship and not have weight keeping you down and not being able to take next steps. And so these are all the four that I've given so far are very good foundational exercises to help improve vagus nerve function. But for some people, they've gotten into a state of disease that's so severe that doing these just isn't quite enough. And often there's a missing tool or something that we can add in to help improve this. And that's where technology can come in and be really helpful. And this is actually a picture of my daughter, and I do this with her every
Hmm?
night.
So
But we
cute.
do electrical vagus nerve stimulation on her vagus nerve. Something I do myself. There's many different devices out there now, whether it's a Truvega or a Pulsetto or whatever you want to choose. These are vagus nerve exercise or vagus nerve stimulation tools that are phenomenal, that are super safe, and have helped numerous patients of mine through inflammatory plateaus or challenges that they weren't able to overcome when working with other practitioners. And this is a great way to help improve your vagus nerve function using tech and overcome and shift your body state. This is almost like replacement brake pads for that system, right? When the brakes are worn
Yeah.
out, how do we rebuild or replace those brake pads? This is a great way to do that. And it's very, very effective in just 2 to 4 minutes per day. And there's a ton of reputable and amazing research out there from very reputable institutions as well. So this is by far for me some of the best tools that I can recommend to optimize vagus nerve function, to get things working in the right way. And really what I want to do is help people understand exactly what's going wrong within the vagus nerve, how to assess their vagus nerve function, and provide these amazing tools that are available for all of us to be able to make positive changes and really optimize our health and learn how to control inflammation more effectively. Ultimately, that's my role in life, is to help people uh, achieve optimal health so they can be out there sharing their unique, ingenious ways of uh, connecting and being better people overall.
That was yeah, I'm kind of speechless. I mean, I didn't know what your presentation was. I mean, read your book and listened to you and all that. So I figured some of it, but that was amazing. I didn't know what order would be. With so much alignment with what we try to do for businesses, we got to do for ourselves. There's a saying, if people ran their companies the way they treat HR, they'd go broke, right? Because everyone focuses on they focus on the wrong things, right? And same thing in business and entrepreneurship, that you just go into this constant prep mode and you forget to look after yourself as a business leader, as a father, as a partner, as a brother, as a friend, son, daughter, whatever the person may be. I think it's really incredible that the way you've broken down. So before we wrap, we talked about breathing, we talked about physical trauma, inflammatory food, processed food, gut symbiosis, obviously poor detoxification, and then the last one is the emotional but not physical trauma. And Tom, these are the things that's going on. The picture you shared at the beginning was very powerful along the way. So again, if any audience here is listening in, I encourage you to at least go to the YouTube channel and look at some of the slides and presentations if you need to see it visually. And then obviously some of the tips that you talked about, some of them were new for me. So upgrade your breathing is clearly powerful, as you described. You talked about the extreme temperatures. And I know Oxford University, with a few other people, are doing lots of research on this, like really clinical type research, just to how it unlocks health. So I think this is no longer a theory. This should be a practice. Like, this should be mainstream. And I think to your point, we're getting there. The mindfulness we talked about, important. Completely new to me was the vocalization piece. Like, I did not thinking about it, but if you think about music, you can be in the worst mood, hear your favorite song, and instantly changes. So when you were going through that, I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like you said, but you hear your favorite song, you just belt out what the words are. And last but not least is the electrical vagus nerve stimulation. Yeah, and if you've got any links for any tools. I know this is probably not a new field, but a new field probably in terms of the mainstream conversation and whatnot. So I'm glad to bring that part of it, because it is about technology, and that's the beauty, right? Within the mind, Napoleon Hill said it best: "With the mind, a man can conceive and believe, it can achieve." And it all starts there. So thank you for your time. This was an absolutely priceless podcast and YouTube video. Really appreciate what you do for the world, being a friend and mentor, and really sharing the message and serving your mission and purpose in life to really quite literally save lives, right? Like, it's no joke. Like, this could save a life. Someone does it, you're saving a life. You're preventing chronic disease and helping people literally get to the golden age of 100 with good quality of life, not just last 20 years, God forbid, in some difficult state. So thank you, my friend.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.